Hello, Ranger Ruvain from the Visitor Center. We have Vintage Magnet with us today.
Hello, Visitor Center. It's nice to be talking to all of you today. My name is Ranger Ruvain, and I work for Channel Islands National Park. And today, I'm coming to you live from underwater in Anacapa Landing Cove. This program is really special because right now, I'm connected to you and you're connected to me, even though I'm underwater. Because I can hear you and you can see and hear me. And we're also connected to the wildlife around us, like the California sea lion that just swam by and might just make a few cameos behind me during this presentation. Now, one of the reasons I'm able to talk to you today is because for the last several years, dedicated volunteer Andrea, who's behind the camera today, has been helping us to get this program running again. So if you could all join me in feeling our connection to Andrea and saying, thank you, Andrea, on the count of 3 from Bethany, we can show our appreciation for being able to talk today. Are you ready?
Ready.
One,
2, 3.
And Andrea is showing her waving support from behind the camera. So right now, I'm connected to you, and you're connected to me. But we're also connected to other agencies that help manage our park and our sanctuary. Because right now, we're in Channel Islands National Park and Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary. And so I'm here supported by some of my colleagues, like Vanessa, a scientist with Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary. And we are connected together because we help manage our park and sanctuary in unison. So thank you very much to Vanessa for supporting this dive. You'll see her more later. And not only am I connected to you on the mainland today, we're also connected to the ocean around us in what is Channel Islands National Park and Sanctuary. Because right now, I'm coming to you live from an underwater forest. And we can investigate how we're connected to this forest together. In order to do that, I want to ask you guys a question. What first comes to mind when you think of the word forest?
Okay, I'm going to find an answer here. Okay. Ranger Ruvain, the answer is kelp forest.
Oh, that's a great answer. Because right now we are inside of a kelp forest here at Anacapa Island. And when you think about the kind of forest that we encounter on the mainland, what words come to mind?
What words come to mind? Let me find an answer for us here. All right, our answer is trees.
Yeah, I know that I like to go walking in the forest of trees near where I live. But underwater here, we're in a very unique kind of forest because I am surrounded by a forest made up not of plants, not of trees, but of kelp. Kelp is a type of algae. And this particular species, giant kelp, is one of the largest and fastest growing algae in the world. And so today we can investigate how we're connected to kelp and maybe how similar or different kelp might be from the forests that we see on land of trees. Forests with trees on land have leaves that help them photosynthesize or take in sunlight. And kelp has these blades, which are very similar to leaves of trees that you might find on land. This blade right here on giant kelp helps them take in sunlight They take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen into the air that we can breathe. But kelp is also a little bit different from trees that we might see on land. Because kelp, just like me, is underwater. It has to deal with surge and with currents. So unlike the trunk of a tree, which is pretty solid and hard, kelp has the stike, which is flexible and bendy and can move just like me with the currents in the water. Now, trees on land have root systems that help them take up nutrients and connect to the ground. Well, let's head down this strand of kelp and take a look at how this kelp is connected to the ocean floor below. You might notice that the kelp itself is extending way up to the surface because they have these little gas bladders. The fancy word is pneumaticists, but I like to call them air pods. They don't help them listen to music, but they do help them stay afloat and reach the surface where they can get the most sunlight. And the reason the kelp is able to reach the surface and not get dragged away by the currents is because they have a really special function, a lot like the roots of a tree. As Andrea zooms in here, we can see the holdfast of the kelp. The holdfast, like roots, helps the kelp stay connected to the ocean floor and keeps the kelp from just drifting away. Now this kelp is pretty cool, and we can see how I'm connected to this kelp forest as I dive in it today. But how are we connected to the kelp forest out on the mainland? Well, in order for the kelp to grow, it takes in carbon dioxide and releases oxygen. Kelp and other algae that grow in the oceans produce half of the oxygen in the planet's oceans and atmosphere. That means that every breath we take, we have half of that to thank for kelp and its friends. So do we want to demonstrate that today, Ranger Bethany? Do we want to take a big breath together and we can all shout out in unison, thanks for the help, kelp?
I love that. Let's give it a try. All right, we're going to take one big breath in, and when we release, we're going to say, thanks for the help, kelp. Ready? All right. Did you get that?
Yeah, and so we are all connected to the kelp. It helps us breathe. But the kelp forest is also connected to many different animals around us. There's over 1,000 different species of marine life that live in the kelp forest. And we actually, thanks to my colleague Vanessa, will be able to see a couple of those today. Because the kelp forest provides food and habitat for many different species, from the large sea lions and fish that we were seeing earlier, smaller animals like those that I have here. Now, Vanessa was able to drop off a couple of really unique animals with me that live in the forest. These might look like little spiky balls in my hands here. And these are called urchins. The one on my left is a purple urchin. And urchins are native to the kelp forest. They live here. On the bottom of the urchin, you can see these really cool mouths that help them graze on the kelp. Urchins like to hide in cracks and crevices in a healthy kelp forest and come out to nibble on little pieces of kelp and drift by. So kelp is connected to these urchins because it provides them with a home as well as with food in order to survive. And many other species around here like to eat the urchins as well. So I'm going to pass this back to my colleague Vanessa and trade her for another species that we found in the kelp forest. This individual is one of my favorite animals in the kelp forest. Does anybody want to guess what animal I'm holding in my hand today?
Yeah, we have some guesses here. Hold on one moment. His answer is a snail.
Yeah, this is a snail. And this is a really fun kind of snail. I like the name of the snail. It's called a wavy turban snail. But sometimes we just call them wavy tops for short. Wavy tops live in the kelp forest. They like to graze on algae. And they've got a very unique defense structure where they've got this nice spiral shell around them. And at the bottom, they've got this hard cover that they can hide into called the operculum. You can see underneath the hard shell of the snail. Wavy tops also need the kelp forest here to survive. It's their home. And there's other animals that focus on these wavy turban snails as well, such as this other snail. In my hand here, we have a Kelp's whelk. Now, this is a very different animal from the turban snail. Kelp's whelk is predatory. There's some real snail-on-snail violence going on here, where Kelp's whelk have a proboscis, or a really long tongue-like appendage that can go out and help them attack other snails or invertebrates, other creatures without backbones living out here in the ocean. So the kelp is connected to the animals that graze on it and connected to animals like this whelk, who are predators of all of the algae consumers out here. And I've got one other animal to show you that's connected to the kelp forest, which I'm going to receive here from my colleague Vanessa. Another one of my favorites because of its name. Here I have a warty sea cucumber. Now, these sea cucumbers have a superpower. They're able to expel their guts when they feel threatened. If a predator comes by and tries to attack them, they can spit out all of their internal organs in order to distract the predator and get away. Pretty wild to think about if somebody scared you and you were able to spit out your internal organs for defense. And these cucumbers are connected to the kelp as well. They're kind of like the worms of the kelp forest community. They can crawl along the ocean floor, and they like to eat decomposing kelp and other material. They help give oxygen into the ocean floor so animals that burrow here can survive. So in this way, we can see that all of the different animals in the kelp forest are connected to the kelp and to the ecosystem it provides. We'll let this sea cucumber go on its way today. Now, there are many other animals as well that are connected to the kelp forest. We saw other predators, like the California sea lion, swim by me earlier today. And there are animals like sheephead, which is a big fish, red and black striped, as well as sunflower stars, which is a big type of sea star, who both like to eat some of the animals we talked about today. Now, here at Anacapa Landing Cove, we are inside of a marine reserve, meaning that for many years, humans have decided that we are not going to fish or take any wildlife out of this area. And as a result, you can see that the kelp forest is healthy. Outside of marine reserves are areas where there's no protection for the animals. There are fewer predators like sheephead or like lobsters, and animals like the urchin, which are native to our kelp forest. They belong here. Their populations get out of balance and they start to munch on the kelp and mow through our kelp forest. And we know this because of the help of members of our monitoring team, like my colleague, Dr. Scott Gabara, as well. Here at Channel Islands for over 40 years, we have been monitoring the kelp forest. Scientists like Scott here are keeping tabs on how healthy our kelp is, how well different species are doing in our kelp forest, in order to help managers decide if we need to take action and do things like establish this marine reserve in Anacapa. So in that way, we are connected to the kelp too. The kelp is connected to us by providing us oxygen and creating this ecosystem around us, and our actions impact the kelp too. So I want to ask you all, other than monitoring the kelp forest here, what can we do? How can we help the kelp? Or help
Okay,
our ocean?
let me get some answers. How can we help the kelp, friends? Please raise your hand.
By not cutting it down.
By not cutting it down.
Cutting it down. That's a great answer. So here, when divers like us are in the kelp forest, we try to be very careful not to get tangled up, not to accidentally knock into the kelp and get to a point where we would have to cut it to get free, because we want to keep the kelp healthy all around us. So that's an awesome answer. What about another one, Bethany?
All right, I'm going up to someone here. We have an answer.
Not to put trash in the ocean.
Yeah, not to put trash in the ocean. That's a great one. We actually found a piece of trash out here earlier in Anacapa Landing Cove. Because another way that we are connected to the ocean around us is that we are we have to be very careful about remembering to dispose of our trash properly and try and reduce and recycle what we have. Because this notice of a maximum weight of 2,000 pounds, this sign, we found it in Anacapa Landing Cove earlier. So the trash from the mainland does make its way out to the island. Thankfully, I weigh under 2,000 pounds, so I think I'm still safe to give this presentation. But we want to be extra careful about disposing of our trash properly, about not littering, and trying to reduce the amount of trash that we make so it doesn't end up in the ocean. How about one more, Ranger Bethany?
Copy. Let me find someone here. All right, we have a answer here.
We could move some sea urchins to another place so that they don't eat too much kelp.
Oh, that was a really interesting answer. Yeah. So sea urchins and other grazers that are out of balance in some areas, moving them to another location. There's actually some projects getting started around here in the Channel Islands and farther up north in California about taking some urchins from barrens, which are those areas where the urchins have eaten all of the kelp, and moving them onto the mainland. Because humans like to eat healthy urchins as a type of sushi called uni. And so there's recovery efforts underway, both to help restore the predators, who keep the urchin populations in check and to move the urchins themselves. So those are all great answers of how we can help the kelp. Because as we've learned in this program today, even though we might seem far away from each other, I here in Inaccessible Landing Cove underwater in the kelp forest and you on the mainland, we are connected. The health of the kelp forest impacts us by producing the air that we breathe, by supporting the fish that live around us here, by taking in carbon dioxide. And we impact the kelp, and we're connected to the kelp in how we manage, how we fish, by the trash that we create, by making sure that we are being responsible stewards of our oceans. And so I want to thank you all today for taking the time to learn more about the kelp forest and for joining us live for the first time in 5 years that we have put on the Channel Islands Live presentation. So I appreciate you being connected to me as we've learned more about the kelp and the oceans around us.
Thank you, Ranger Ruvain.
And as Andrew pans here to the kelp, do we have time, Bethany, for a couple of questions from our audience?
We have a wonderful response from our school. Thank you so much for taking time with us, Ranger Ruvain.
Thank you, Bethany. It was great talking to you. Do we have any time for questions?
Yeah, I think we have a couple minutes for a few questions. So I'll take a few here. All right, the question is,
why do some animals actually spit out their guts?
I think I heard that question was, why do some animals spit out their guts?
correct.
So with the one I had earlier, with the sea cucumber, there's actually a couple answers. One is to help them escape predators who are coming near them. But another one is they actually do it every year anyways, to help get rid of sand and other debris in their internal body. They'll spit out all of their guts and regrow them every year. So there's a couple of reasons why they might do that. Awesome question. Do we have another?
Yes, we have some other questions here. All right, hold please. The question is,
What is the most trash you found?
Oh, that's a great question. What is the most trash that I found? I found some pretty large pieces of trash before. We had some giant bales of cotton that washed up on Santa Rosa Island that fell off of shipping containers in the Santa Barbara Channel. They were way bigger than me. So that's got to be one of the largest pieces of trash I've ever found.
okay, we have a few more questions here. Okay. All right, the question is,
Since some animals spit out their guts, does that make them immortal?
You know, I've never followed an individual sea cucumber after it's fed on its guts to test that theory. But unfortunately, well, it might help them survive to the next year. I don't think it makes sea cucumbers immortal per se, but it is a wild kind of health cleanse to be on.
okay, thank you. We have another question here. The question is,
What happens if they spit out all their guts?
They regrow them. So echinoderms, which is the general group of animals that sea cucumbers belong to, are really good at regenerating themselves. So they can regrow their guts. They can regrow their arms if they're a sea star that are related to sea cucumbers. Oh, looks like we found one right here. Thanks to volunteer Andrea has found a sea cucumber. on the ocean floor that we can show you right here. So this little guy is still attached to the rock, is capable of spitting out its guts and then regrowing them. That's what happens afterwards. Much like other members of its family.
Awesome. All right, we have another question.
How many eggs do sea cucumbers grow?
The question was, how many eggs do sea cucumbers grow?
Correct.
That is a good question. The answer is many. The exact number would be hard to say. For me, I don't know, but it's many thousands. The sea cucumbers will lay their eggs externally. They'll release their eggs externally, I should say, out in the environment around them. They're pretty uninvolved parents compared to us as humans. They're not picking their kids up from soccer practice. So they produce many, many eggs, some of which have survived, but many don't. So very unlike humans in the way that they take care of their eggs and their kids.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. All right, and the question is?
What's the biggest animal you've seen?
Oh, that's a good question. The biggest animal I've ever seen is a blue whale, which is the biggest animal that has ever lived. Now, I haven't seen one while diving, but I've seen them from the boats around the Channel Islands. The biggest animal I've seen underwater in the Channel Islands is a giant black sea bass, or a species of fish that was once pretty common, but is increasingly under threat from overfishing. And so action was taken based on monitoring to help preserve that fish and reduce the amount of fishing and conserve their populations. So sea bass are starting to make a recovery here at the Channel Islands. But I've had huge sea bass, 400 or 500 pounds, come up right behind me while I was underwater.
All right, I think that's all we have time for today, Ranger Ruvain. Thank you so much. Can we give him a big round of applause, everyone? Big thank you from Vintage Magnet and big congratulations on our first live dive since 2020.
Thank you, Ranger Bethany.
Lots of applause from the landing cove here too. Congratulations, guys.
Bye. Take care. It was
Thank
nice
you,
to be
Ranger
connected
Ruvain.
to you.